Hi, my name's Ollie, and in this Politics Explained video, I'm going to go through everything you need to know about the Democratic Party in Edexcel A-level politics. I'm going to start by looking at the parts of the specification this video covers and the key potential essay questions and 12 markers you get asked on this in the exam. I'm then going to start by giving you a history of the Democratic Party and its policies, then going into the general policy attitudes of the Democrats, looking at the kind of their progressive attitude on social and moral issues, their kind of support for greater government intervention in the economy and government provision of social welfare, before finally looking at the structure of the Democratic Party and the different factions within the party and the key kind of policy attitudes of each of them. The PDF you can see on your screen is part of an updated textbook on US Edexcel A-level politics, which you can find on the Politics Explained website, where you can also find loads of other resources to help you in your politics A-level, including detailed essay plans, updated textbooks for different parts of the course, and a place to sign up for tutoring if you're interested. Yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. So starting off with the parts of the specification this video covers. So this is the first of 3 videos on the channel that are going to be on the policies, of the Republican and Democratic parties. So this first one's going to look at the Democrat Party and their key policies. The next one's going to look at the Republican Party, and afterwards I'm going to do a video comparing them. This is in the US Democracy and Participation, part of the kind of Edexcel US course, and it's the kind of final chapter of it, and there's going to be 7 videos on this chapter, and this is I think the 4th video out of them. So we're going to have a look at the key ideas and principles of the Democratic Party, looking at the distribution of power and changing significance of the parties. So here's the key kind of 3 policy attitudes of the Democrats that we're going to have a look at, and also the current conflicts and tendencies and the changing power and influence that exist within the parties, the Democrats, Liberals, Moderates, and Conservatives. In terms of potential essay questions you could get asked, I think you could easily get questions comparing the Democrats with the Labour Party in terms of policy and potentially in terms of tensions as well. You could also get one comparing generally parties in the UK and the US. And as I said, with as I've been saying throughout the videos, with a lot of these US questions, they're a little bit more difficult to predict. You get lots of other different questions as well. Same can be said of the 30 markers. You get a question kind of comparing the Republicans and Democrats, so are they more similar than they are different? You could get a question on party unity, looking at the factions, so are the Democrats more unified than the Republican Party? You can also get ones specifically on one of the parties, so is the Democratic Party a highly divided party? Or, as I said, lots of other kind of different types of questions as well that could be just on the Democratic Party. So kind of knowing the content really well is important so that you can adapt it to different questions. Starting off then with the history of the Democratic Party and its policies. I'm first looking at the early 19th century origins of the party and Jacksonian democracy. This was in the kind of early to mid 19th century. And the party's early roots can be traced back to the early 19th century, evolving from the Democratic Republican Party founded by Jefferson and James Madison. Initially, the party's policies were grounded in the principles of Jeffersonian democracy, emphasizing agrarianism, states' rights, and limited government. Under Andrew Jackson's presidency, the party underwent significant transformations, embracing a more populist approach. And Jacksonian democracy represented a shift towards greater democratic participation for the common man, albeit still for white men. Jackson's policies included opposition to the National Bank, support for westward expansion, and the controversial implementation of the Indian Removal Act. What you then have is civil war and Reconstruction. So during the Civil War, the Democratic Party was deeply divided between the Northern Democrats, who opposed secession from the United States, and Southern Democrats, who supported it, largely over the issue of slavery. Southern Democrats strongly supported slavery and states' rights, viewing them as essential to their economic and social order. This led to them being key to the Confederacy movement. And post-Civil War, during the Reconstruction period, the party opposed radical Reconstruction and advocated for states' rights and limited federal intervention. The Democrats during this period were often in opposition to policies that aimed to protect the rights of freed slaves and were associated with the re-establishment of white supremacy in the South. This included support for the Jim Crow laws that enforced racial segregation and the use of violence and intimidation by groups like the KKK to suppress black political participation. The party's stance during this period was instrumental in the disenfranchisement and great violence against African Americans, and the establishment of a system of institutionalized racial segregation that would last for decades. What you then see, kind of from the kind of the late 20th century, the late 19th century, up until the mid 20th century, is the Progressive era and the New Deal. So the turn of the 20th century saw the Democratic Party beginning to embrace more progressive policies, particularly under the leadership of Woodrow Wilson. During this period, the party supported antitrust legislation, so it's kind of anti-monopolies in the economy, income tax, and banking reforms. Wilson's presidency marks a significant shift in the party's stance towards a more active federal government in economic and social issues, kind of moving actually away from kind of its original roots in Jacksonian democracy. The most significant transformation came with FDR's New Deal in response to the Great Depression. The New Deal marked a radical shift in the party's policy, advocating for extensive government intervention in the economy, the establishment of social welfare programs, and the protection of labor rights across the US. This era redefined the Democratic Party as the party of federal government intervention to promote economic welfare and social justice across society, and it was a key era of dominance for the Democratic Party, particularly in the presidency and in Congress. What you see then, from the kind of end of the Second World War to the 1980s, is the Democratic Party playing a key role in the civil rights movement. Under presidents like Harry S. Truman, who desegregated the armed forces, and LBJ, who signed the Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act, the party decisively moved away from its segregationist past and became associated with civil rights and social liberalism. This also saw the party advocating for expanded social welfare programs, environmental protection, and a more dovish foreign policy compared to the Republicans in the context of the Cold War. The party's support for social justice and civil liberties became central to its identity, leading to a realignment of the political landscape and a shift in its voter base. The support for social justice included support for the women's rights movement, and the party supporting pro-choice abortion policies by the late 1970s. This realignment in this period, as we'll talk about kind of in a couple of videos time, we look at comparing kind of voters, the Republican and Democratic parties, saw African American voters begin to be kind of closely associated with the Democratic Party, and they'd be a key voter base for them throughout the 20th century, or the kind of second half of the 20th century, despite the Democratic Party's segregationist past. So as you saw a kind of real realignment in US politics at this stage. In the late 20th century, the party adapted to the political climate of the Reagan era, characterized by the rise of conservatism and dominance of the Republican Party. Under leaders like Clinton, the party shifted towards the centre on economic issues, similar to how Blair did a bit later. And Blair actually learned a lot from Clinton in the kind of 1990s. So under Clinton, the party shifted to the centre, advocating for free trade, deregulation in some sectors, and welfare reform, whilst maintaining progressive stances on some social issues. And this era, often associated with the Third Way, represents an attempt to reconcile left-wing social policies with centre-right economic policies. In terms of the present then, in the 21st century, the Democratic Party has faced new challenges and undergone further evolution. The parties continued to advocate for social justice issues, including LGBTQ+ rights, healthcare reform, and addressing climate change. Under Obama's presidency, significant achievements included the Affordable Care Act and the legalization of same-sex marriage. And the party has also seen internal debates regarding its direction, with the progressive wing led by figures such as Sanders and AOC advocating for more radical changes like universal healthcare and stronger measures against climate change. The party's response to the Trump presidency and the growing polarization in American politics has been a defining aspect in its recent policy positions, emphasizing inclusion, diversity, competence, and a more comprehensive approach to social welfare. Okay, what we're going to have a look at now is the general policy attitudes of the Democrats. The Democratic Party has traditionally held a progressive stance on social and moral issues, advocating for equality and justice across various domains. In terms of racial equality, the party has a long history of supporting civil rights, dating back to the support for the Civil Rights Act of the 1960s under LBJ. In recent years, Democratic leaders have endorsed movements like BLM and proposed legislation aimed at police reform and criminal justice reform, in particular the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. Regarding reproductive rights, Democrats have been staunch defenders of Roe v. Wade since its inception, advocating for women's rights to choose and access to healthcare services. Whilst the Obama administration's Affordable Care Act, which included provisions for contraceptive coverage, exemplifies this commitment, as does Biden and Democrats' strong criticism of the Supreme Court after the overturning of Roe v. Wade. In terms of LGBTQ plus rights, the Democratic Party played a significant role in advancing same-sex marriage, notably with the Obama administration's decision to stop defending the Defense of Marriage Act in court, which is a precursor to the Supreme Court's legalization of same-sex marriage nationwide in 2015. On crime, modern Democrats have advocated for reforming the criminal justice system, focusing on reducing mass incarceration and addressing systemic biases. Many Democrats have supported the elimination of cash bail, which disproportionately affects low-income individuals, and have championed the decriminalisation of marijuana, a move aimed at addressing the racial disparities in drug-related arrests and convictions. The party has supported initiatives for gun control, advocating for comprehensive background checks, assault weapon bans, and red flag laws to reduce gun violence and enhance public safety, and have also been active in promoting voting rights. For example, with the For the People Act, which aimed to expand voting and protect election integrity. So that's kind of a range of issues in which they kind of support progressive attitudes on social and moral issues. Another key kind of aspect of their policy is supporting greater governmental intervention in the national economy. So they've long supported a more significant role of government intervention in the national economy. This is rooted in the idea that government intervention is necessary to address market failures, reduce economic inequality, and provide essential services. This has historically included support for regulations that protect workers, consumers, and the environment. The Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Acts, implemented following the 2008 financial crisis, sought to increase financial regulation and prevent future crises. More recently, Democrats have advocated for protecting the Right to Organise Act, which aims to strengthen labour rights and make it easier for workers to form unions and negotiate better pay and conditions. In the 21st century, the Democrats' support for greater intervention could be seen in its climate change agenda, which has sought to comprehensively tackle climate change and shift the economy to doing so whilst creating jobs and promoting social equality. Obama's Clean Power Plan aimed to reduce carbon emissions from power plants, and the left of the party has strongly supported the Green New Deal, which proposes a transformative plan to address climate change and economic inequality at the same time by shifting to renewable energy sources. Whilst the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, championed by the Democrats and Biden, allocated billions of dollars towards renewable energy projects and tax incentives for clean energy, directly supporting the growth of green jobs and fostering a shift towards a more sustainable, low-carbon economy. Healthcare is another key area with the Affordable Care Act representing a substantial government intervention aimed at extending health insurance coverage to millions of Americans, particularly low-income Americans. Whilst Biden's American Rescue Plan, a response to COVID-19, included significant economic stimulus measures and provisions for substantial energy development, illustrating the party's commitment to combining economic intervention with environmental sustainability. Final key one to look at then is the government provision of social welfare. And this is a key cornerstone of Democratic Party policy that encompasses a wide range of programs aimed at improving quality of life and reducing poverty for the US population. Its advocacy for government-provided social welfare can be traced through landmark legislation and policy initiatives that lay the foundation for the modern welfare state. Social Security, introduced by FDR as part of the New Deal, established a government-run pension system for the elderly, funded by employee and employer payroll taxes. As part of LBJ's Great Society program, Medicare and Medicaid were first introduced to provide government-funded health insurance for the first time for the elderly and low-income individuals, respectively, significantly expanding healthcare access in the United States. In recent years, the Affordable Care Act under Obama marked a significant expansion of government involvement in healthcare, aiming to make health insurance more accessible and affordable. And the ACA increased health care access and affordability by mandating individual health coverage, expanding Medicaid eligibility, and establishing health insurance marketplaces with subsidies for low and middle income individuals. Under the Biden administration, the expanded child tax credit in the American Rescue Plan reflected the continued efforts to support families and reduce child poverty. This temporarily increased the credit amount and allowed for periodic advance payments to families, directly providing financial support aimed to reduce child poverty in the context of the pandemic in particular by supplementing household income. And additionally, Democrats have consistently advocated for increased federal funding for public education with a focus on equal access and quality, as well as expanded unemployment benefits and food assistance programs. Okay, That was a kind of first introduction to policy of the Democrats. What we're going to have a look at now is the structure of the Democratic Party. Firstly, the Democratic National Committee is the principal governing body of the Democratic Party, responsible for formulating and promoting the Democratic platform, coordinating strategies for national elections and fundraising. It's composed of representatives from each state and US territory, including party chairs and vice chairs, along with over 200 members elected by Democrats in each state. Each state has its own Democratic Committee, which operates under the general guidance of the DNC, but with considerable autonomy. And these state committees are instrumental in grassroots, organising, mobilising voters at the local level, and coordinating state and local elections. Effectively, the DNC brings together key figures from each of these states. The chair of the DNC, appointed by the sitting Democratic president or elected by committee members in the absence of a Democratic president, holds significant influence over party strategy and decision making, and Jamie Harrison currently serves as the chair of the DNC. The Democratic president, when there is one in office, holds a significant leadership position within the party, often setting the political agenda, driving policy direction, and is the most important figure in party fundraising, campaigning efforts, and by far the most important leadership figure within the party. There are also, though, leadership figures in the US Congress, and these are often some of the most significant figures if there isn't a Democratic president. So this includes the House Speaker or Minority Leader and the Senate Minority or Majority Leader, depending on whether the party has a majority in each chamber. These leaders play critical roles in shaping legislative agendas, rallying party members for votes, and representing the party in negotiations with the opposition and in Congress. Nancy Pelosi was a key figure within the party as leader of the House Democrats, and therefore Speaker or Minority Leader for long periods between 20 years, between 2003 and 2023. There's also the Democratic Governors Organization that supports the election and tenure of Democratic governors in each state. While it operates independently of the DNC, the DGA plays a vital role in policy promotion at the state level and provides a platform for governors to influence national party policy. Gavin Newsom, Governor of California, has become known, for example, for his progressive policies and leadership during the COVID-19 pandemic, and has become particularly popular. There's also the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee and the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, and their respective arms of the Democratic Party aimed at electing Democrats to each of the House of Representatives or the Senate, playing a key role in fundraising, advising on campaigns, and providing resources to candidates. I don't expect that kind of stuff to be really important in any essay, really, not necessarily come up. It's useful background in case it could be relevant, potentially in a 12 marker, and just useful to you to know. The final part of the video we're then going to have a look at is the different factions within the Democratic Party, including their policies and the relevant and the kind of respective current power balance between the different factions. So the party has historically been a broad church, encompassing a wide range of views from its progressive wing to its conservative members. Today, the party continues to house distinct factions, from the left-leaning progressives to the centrist moderates and the more conservative blue dogs. This breadth allows the party to represent a wide swathe of the American electorate, catering to diverse viewpoints and regional differences. However, it also presents challenges in maintaining unity and cohesiveness, especially when navigating complex policy debates and legislative strategies. First key faction we're going to have a look at is the liberals or progressives. So the progressive faction in the Democratic Party represents a left wing, advocating for sweeping reforms to address issues like economic inequality, climate change, healthcare, and social justice. This group has been gaining momentum, particularly in the 21st century, as issues of economic disparity and environmental concerns have become more pronounced. In terms of their key policy positions, economic reform is a key one. They call for increased taxation on the wealthy to address economic inequality, support raising the minimum wage to a living wage, and advocate for stricter regulation of financial institutions, particularly banks. In terms of healthcare, they champion Medicare for all, proposing to overhaul the current private healthcare system with a single-payer government-run program to ensure healthcare as a universal right. In terms of climate change, as we kind of mentioned beforehand, they're strong supporters of the Green New Deal, a bold framework to aim to tackle climate change through a combination of massive investment in green jobs and infrastructure and initiatives to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions. In social justice, they're kind of strongly supportive of criminal justice reform, including ending mass incarceration and police reform, and actively support racial equality, gender equality, and LGBTQ+ rights, aligning closely with movements like the Black Lives Matter movement to address systemic injustices. On education, they advocate for free college tuition and significant measures to alleviate or eliminate student debt. And on foreign policy, they emphasise diplomacy over military intervention, advocating for a foreign policy that prioritises human rights. For example, in relation to the current Israel kind of the violence in Gaza, they've kind of been strongly opposed to Biden's stance, which has continued to be supportive of Israel. In terms of labour and workers' rights, progressives push for stronger labour unions and fair labour practices, seeking to protect workers' rights and improve work conditions. Also supporting trade policies that favour the American worker and opposing trade agreements which they view as exploitative. And finally, in terms of immigration reform, they support a humane approach to immigration, advocating for comprehensive reform that includes a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, opposing stricter border enforcement measures and viewing them as harsh and ineffective. In terms of key figures, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are relatively important figures within the Senate, though in certain ways, Warren in particular is potentially not as left-wing as some of these other members we're going to mention. Sanders' presidential campaigns in 2016 and 2020 brought many progressive policies into the national spotlight. The Squad, a group of younger congresswomen, including Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, and Rashida Tlaib, known for their vocal advocacy on progressive issues and their adept use of social media, have become particularly prominent. And the Squad has actually, since these kind of first four individuals, now kind of been known to expand to include figures like Cori Bush. And there are quite a few others as well. Representing actually the fact that there's an increasing number of progressives being elected, particularly as they're primary or successfully defeating more moderate members in primaries. In terms of the Democratic Socialists, this group includes key figures like Ocasio-Cortez and Tlaib, and represents a more radical wing within the faction, drawing on more Democratic Socialist principles to advocate for systemic change. The Democratic Socialists as a group are strongly supported within the party kind of primary, more moderate figures. In terms of their historical development and current influence in the party, the modern progressive faction gained momentum since the late 20th century, was significantly propelled by Sanders' 2016 and 2020 presidential campaigns, which brought issues like economic inequality and climate change to the forefront of the Democratic agenda, kind of supporting Medicare for all and the Green New Deal, for example, and mobilising support for kind of a substantial younger voter base. Despite being a minority within the party, progressives have notably influenced democratic discourse, especially on healthcare, climate change, and social justice. However, their more radical proposals often encounter resistance and fail to be passed, in particular from the moderate wing, highlighting the ongoing internal debate over the party's direction. The faction's future influence will depend on its ability to advocate for bold reforms whilst navigating internal party dynamics. As national issues like climate change and economic inequality persist, the progressive wing's role in shaping democratic policies and energizing its voter base, which is particularly among younger voters, is expected to be significant. In terms of the moderate faction, often referred to as centrists, they represent a pragmatic wing of the party, advocating for policies and solutions that are viewed as more politically achievable and often appeal to a broader range of interests, including independents and moderate Republicans. Their influence has been crucial in shaping the party's strategies, particularly in swing states and districts. They adopt more balanced economic policies, favoring market-based solutions alongside targeted government interventions, and advocate for fiscal responsibility. In terms of healthcare, while supportive of reforms to increase healthcare access, for example with the Affordable Care Act, moderates generally prefer improving the ACA over the more radical overhauls like the idea of Medicare for all. In climate change, they support pragmatic approaches to environmental issues such as market-based mechanisms, and this can be seen in the Inflation Reduction Act, rather than comprehensive plans like the Green New Deal. And on social issues, whilst generally supportive of social justice, they advocate for more incremental approaches to reforms in areas like criminal justice, immigration, and racial inequality, and more likely to compromise at points across all of these areas of policy with Republicans. Support maintaining strong international alliances in foreign policy, and increasingly, especially under Biden, also supporting kind of protectionist approaches in relation to China. And education policy, they support reforms to public education that may be more open to charter schools and testing standards across the US, focusing on improving existing educational systems rather than overhauling them. And as I mentioned, often endorses free trade agreements and globalization, but do support but increasingly kind of there's a bit of a move away from this, with Biden in particular supporting a bit of a more protectionist approach to China, kind of aligning with the Republican view. And on criminal justice, they endorse reforms aimed at improving the justice system and reducing incarceration rates, but don't support measures perceived as too radical, such as defunding the police. Key figures include President Biden and Amy Klobuchar, emphasising the moderate wing, focusing on bipartisan appeals and pragmatic policy solutions. Biden's presidential campaign and presidency have been marked by efforts to appeal to a broad electorate whilst balancing progressive and moderate policy proposals. And the New Democrat Coalition is a group in Congress that embodies the centrist pro-business policies focusing on economic growth and fiscal responsibility. In terms of its historical development and current influence within the party, the moderate faction has played a significant role in the party for decades, with its roots in the centrist policies of the Clinton era. The faction gained prominence as a counterbalance to the Republican Party's shift to the right and in response to the progressive wing's growing influence within the Democratic Party. Moderates have been crucial in shaping the party's electoral success, particularly in competitive districts and presidential elections. Their ability to appeal to a wide range of voters has been a key strategy for the party, and the current influence of the moderate faction is significant, especially in setting the party's legislative agenda and determining its stance on key issues. While they often find common ground with progressives, their preference for more incremental reforms and bipartisan cooperation can sometimes lead to internal party tensions. The final key faction we're going to have a look at is the Conservatives, or Blue Dogs, and this Conservative faction represents a more centrist, right-leaning segment of the Democratic Party, emphasising fiscal responsibility, a strong national defence, and more moderate to conservative positions on social issues. Their influence is particularly notable in more conservative or swing districts, where they balance democratic principles with right-leaning voter preferences in order to try and kind of win in Republican-leaning districts. In terms of key policy positions, they advocate for fiscal conservatism, emphasising balanced budgets, reducing government debt, and kind of a more cautious approach to government intervention. On healthcare, they support affordable and accessible healthcare, but tend to resist the large-scale overhauls of Medicare for all. On climate change, they acknowledge the need for environmental protection, but often support market-driven solutions and are cautious about policies that can negatively impact business or lead to job losses, particularly within these swing states. You've seen Joe Manchin is a key figure in the Democratic, within the kind of real conservative faction of the Democratic Party, at some stages kind of supporting or opposing like kind of key climate change policies because fossil fuel kind of industries are really key within his state. On social issues, they hold more conservative views than their progressive counterparts, often reflecting centrist or conservative views of their constituencies on issues like gun control and abortion. And on gun control and abortion in particular, you've seen that with Senator Joe Manchin. So Manchin was the only Democrat who voted for Brett Kavanaugh as a Republican kind of Supreme Court nominee, and obviously that would have a significant later impact on abortion because he was a key conservative justice. Also on gun control, though to be fair, Manchin supported some kind of bipartisan efforts at gun control. At points, he's also received support from the NRA due to his generally pro-gun stance. In foreign policy, they generally support a strong defence policy and more inclined to back military interventions compared to the rest of the Democratic Party, and they advocate for stringent immigration policies rather than their progressive counterparts, and tax policies that are business friendly, kind of opposing higher tax rates and rises. Joe Manchin is a senator from West Virginia and is often the pivotal vote in the Senate due to his conservative leanings within the Democratic Party and how closely divided the Senate's been for the last 4 years. He's known for his moderate stances on energy policy, healthcare, and economic issues, often crossing party lines in his voting decisions, or being a key figure failing to support Democratic policies that effectively, as at certain stages, tanked bills, in particular the Build Back Better Act under Biden in 2021. Manchin is notably standing down at the next election. The Blue Dog Coalition is a group in Congress known for its centrist and fiscally conservative policies, including members like Jim Costa and Stephanie Murphy. And notable past members include former Representative John Barrow and Heath Shuler, who are prominent within this faction. In terms of historical development and current influence within the Democratic Party, the Blue Dog Coalition was formed in the mid-1990s to represent the interests of centrist and conservative Democrats, especially after the Democrat losses in the 1994 congressional elections. This was a response to the perception the party had moved too far to the left to be elected. In recent years, their numbers in Congress have significantly decreased, but they continue to play a crucial role, particularly in closely divided legislative sessions. Their support can be pivotal on key votes, as they often act as a moderating force within the party, advocating for bipartisan solutions and bridging gaps with Republican lawmakers. If any Democrats are going to vote with the Republicans, it's going to be this faction of the party. Joe Manchin's vote in particular has been highly important to Joe Biden being able to exercise his agenda. He's been able to exercise an extreme amount of power as the swing vote in a very closely divided Senate. And as a result, has kind of played a role in moderating a large number of Biden's proposals. The influence of the Conservative Democrats is especially significant in shaping policy in areas where the progressive agenda may not be politically feasible, ensuring that legislation can appeal to a broader spectrum of voters, including in swing states. Okay, so that was the different factions. The final thing we're going to have a look at in this video is the balance of power and relationship between the factions. So the relationship is marked both by cooperation and tension. So on the one hand, cooperation is seen in areas like opposition to Republican policies, defence of voting rights and social welfare issues, as well as key pieces of legislation which Biden has been successful in uniting the party behind. The $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan Act 2021 showed unity among Democrats, with all factions rallying to pass the substantial COVID-19 relief, including stimulus checks and unemployment benefits, received no support from the Republican Party. It was passed due to party unity. Another example of cooperation is the passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. While progressives initially sought a larger package, they eventually compromised with moderates and conservatives on a $1.2 trillion bill that focused on traditional infrastructure. However, the approach to achieving these goals can lead to significant internal debates. For instance, the progressive push for Medicare for All has met resistance from moderates and conservatives who prefer improving the Affordable Care Act. And similarly, climate change policy has seen divisions, with progressives advocating for the Green New Deal, whilst moderates and conservatives opt for more incremental market-based solutions. Manchin's opposition was key to stopping moderate and progressive attempts to protect abortion rights, as he joined Senate Republicans in blocking legislation intended to enshrine abortion protections into law following Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization in 2022. In terms of the current balance of power between the factions, it's delicately poised. The progressive wing has gained significant momentum, particularly among younger voters, and successfully pushed certain issues such as Medicare for All and the Green New Deal into the mainstream Democratic agenda and discourse. However, the moderate faction, represented by Biden, currently wields considerable influence, especially in setting legislative priorities and navigating a path to pass bills in a divided Congress. Conservative senators like Manchin and Sinema have also emerged as pivotal figures, not because they're the main faction within the party, but because the Senate is so closely divided. The individual votes like these can often determine the fate of legislation due to their swing votes, and can therefore have a significant amount of influence. So while the progressive faction is growing in voice and numbers, the centrists and conservatives hold substantial sway, especially in matters requiring cross-party support and in regions where a centrist approach is more politically viable. Moderates and conservatives are more comfortable with cooperating with some Republicans in order to pass bills. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, which included $1.2 trillion in spending, was passed with significant bipartisan support, for example, passing the Senate by 69 to 30. So yeah, that was a key kind of video introducing the kind of policy, structure and factions within the Democratic Party. The next video is going to look at the Republican Party, and then kind of a key video after that is going to kind of be comparing the policies of the two main parties. So look out for both of those as well. Let me know in the comment section below if you have any comments or questions, and I'll get back to you, and I'll see you in the next video.